Lesson 22.1, Task 1. Data distributions and appropriate statistics. Identify distribution shapes. A dot plot is a statistical graph using dots or other marks to show the frequency of distinct data values. A data distribution can be described by its shape when the data are displayed in a dot plot or other statistical graph. All right, uniform, you can see that these are all the same height. Symmetric, which means it's symmetric about 1 point in the middle, which would be the mean, and they have the same shape on both sides. This one is skewed to the left. You can see that fewer values are on the left than on the right. And this one is skewed to the right because more values show up on the left. All right, so the frequency table shows how often two different soccer teams scored the given total numbers of goals per game during one season. All right, so it says, create and label a dot plot to display the frequencies for each team. Then complete the following statements with the missing whole numbers. All right, so if we're going to look at Team A and Team B, all right, so we have possible number of goals. So let's start with Team A. All right, so we're going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so the total goals per game, this is coming from the top here. So I know that I'm going to take these and then I'm going to mark it. So Team A scored 0 goals at 0 games. So total goals per game. Team A scored 1 goal at 2 different games. So for 1, Team A is going to have 2 dots here, or we can mark that with an X if I can get my pen to right here. All right, and then so for Team A, for 2 goals, they had 3 times. So for 2, they had 1, 2, 3. And for 3, 4 games, they had 3 goals. And 4. And for 6, they had 2. All right, so if you look at A, it looks pretty symmetrical here. Let's look at the graph for B. So we're going to have 0, 1, 2. All right, so 3 times they had 0. 4 times they had 1. 3. 3. All right, so you can see that this one is more skewed. It's skewed to the right because more of the data points are on the left. All right, so let's see what the questions ask now that we have created a dot plot. I use X's instead of dots, but this is still considered a dot plot because each X represents an individual game. So it says, create and label the dot plot to display the frequencies for each team. Then complete the following statements with the missing whole numbers. Team A played blank games. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So Team A had 18 games. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 games as well. If both dot plots had an axis labeled 0 through 6, then only team A does not have an X above the 0. So there's no X above the 0 here. All right, it says when you drew the number lines for your dot plots, why didn't you use a scale of 0.5 to show numbers 0, 0.51, and so on? Well, that's because you score goals by whole number integers, not by a half of points. So it says no reason it would have worked. The number of goals are whole numbers only, and some are odd. So that would be the answer for B part. So it says, how are the data distributions alike? All right, so the distributions have the same shape and range, are within one of each other. The distributions have the same number of data values and the same range. The distributions have the same number of data values and the ranges are within one of each other. All right, so this is the best answer. When it's talking about the range, this one goes from 1 to 6. This one goes from 0 to 6. So the range are within one of each other. And they do have the same number of data because they both had 18 games. All right, so it says, how are the data distributions different? The peak for Team A's data distribution is closer to the center, while the peak of Team B's is closer to the left. All right, so that one does seem like the best answer here. The peak of Team A's is closer to the center, while the peak is closer to the right. So that one's not true because the peak is closer to the left. The peak of Team A's is closer to the left. So this one is the only one that it could be. All right, complete the statement about the shape of the data distribution shown in each dot plot. Team A's looks pretty symmetric to me. Team B's plot is skewed. Even though most of the data points are on the left, remember it's going to be skewed to the right. This is the skewed side. It's just got more data points on the left. Complete the following statements. The mean for Team A is, all right, so we could put all of these numbers in our calculator and calculate the mean. So if we put 1 plus 1, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do 1 plus 1 plus, this one's going to be 2 3 times, so I'm just going to do plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. I could have just added 6 there, but I'm just showing you how these would work. Add 3 4 times, because that's how many times, that's the frequency, how many times it shows up. 4 would be added 4 times. 5 is 3 times. And then 6 is twice. All right, we take that number and we divide it by 18. There's 18 total games. That means the mean here is 3.5. All right, let's take a minute, do the same thing for B. Go ahead and find the mean. So pause the computer for just a second, find the mean, and then we will complete this. All right, hopefully you calculated this. You added 0 3 times, which is just 0. So then you've got 4 plus 6 plus 9 and so on. And if you calculated that, you should have got a mean of 2.39 for B. So it says for Team A, blank percent of the data are less than the mean. Okay, about 50% are less than the mean because that's half. For Team B, blank percent of data are less than the mean. All right, so the mean is 2.39. You can see the mean is right in here. and there is a bigger chunk of data there. So it would be 56% is below the mean. All right, how can you explain what you observe in terms of the shape of each data distribution? The observation for Team A makes sense since 50% of the data are less than the mean, which indicates that the same number of data values will be greater than the mean, so the shape of the distribution is symmetric. So this one does look more symmetric. The observation for Team B makes sense that 56% of the data are less than the mean, which indicates that more data values are toward the left of the distribution with a longer tail towards the right. So the shape of the distribution is skewed to the right. So you can see there is more data points clustered here, and it gets smaller over here as a longer, skinnier tail, but that is where it is skewed. All right, that's all for task 1. If you have any questions, let me know.